On your Schoology page, you've got week 2, and to follow along, I just made some kind of fill-in-the-blank notes of the different topics that we're going to be covering. We're going to go over subject pronouns, gender of nouns, how to tell if it's feminine or masculine, then how to make them plural, definite, indefinite articles, and then possessive adjectives, and a little bit of adjectives, just regular adjectives as well. So you can open this up in Notability and fill it out as we go along. I'm going to, for this first section with subject pronouns, go through the whole PowerPoint just real quickly so that we are very familiar with subject pronouns, because they're the basis of conjugating verbs. If you don't know about subject pronouns, you don't know exactly where they go in each box, then you will not be able to conjugate correctly. So the way that we practice subject pronouns is a little bit different than the way that we would normally do things. So we'll go through it, and then feel free to ask questions at any time. Okay. On your paper, you don't have your, the little boxes won't be until the end of this presentation. So when you fill this out on Schoology right here, this will be the review part of the PowerPoint at the very end. But you can kind of fill it in as we go along if you want to. Entirely up to you. Okay. All right, so subject pronouns. Basically, a pronoun takes place of a noun. And the reason why we call them subject pronouns is because, excuse me, they normally take the place of a subject. So instead of saying Bob, Bob, Bob for a whole bunch of sentences, we can replace Bob with he and then continue that sentence. We do this in English a lot. We just have to know the equivalents in Spanish. So we have to learn them in the box because the box directly correlates to how we will conjugate verbs. So fancy grammar terminology for pronouns is first person singular. So you've got the first person on the first box, 1, 2, 3 in order, and then singular always on the left, plural always on the right. And that's also a good way to always narrow down half of your choices. If you look at your subject and you have an and, automatically you're going to have something plural so you can rule out the whole entire singular side. So these are your subject pronouns in English, and in Spanish we've got their equivalents, except for Spanish we've got a formal, informal distinction that we don't have in English, and then we have the feminine masculine issue that we also don't have in English. So first box, first person singular is always going to be yo, and I say yo. Different countries can say yo, kind of like with a J sound. So different dialects of Spanish can have different pronunciations. There's 5 different yous in Spanish. There's the informal or familiar, both synonymous terms there. Informal or familiar you, singular. Then there's the formal you, singular as well. So tú and usted. Then we have these that we don't use. If we go across from the tú form to the plural side, we've got vosotros and vosotras. And those two we decided just as a school to not focus on because, does anybody remember the reason? Spain and Argentina are the countries that use it the most, and so it's not the majority. And so if you, the rule of thumb always is, if you're going to address a group of people as you, so you plural, we're going to always default to the ustedes instead of the vosotros. So the vosotros is a true y'all that we would use in the South. But we're going to use ustedes, and it's always best to be formal in addressing people until they kind of address you in an informal way. Then it's okay to not basically offend anybody. So your 5 yous, coming back to it, 1 for tú, and then usted is the second one, vosotros, vosotras, just different genders there, so they count as 2 different ones, and then ustedes is your 5th you. So obviously you formal plural for ustedes. Okay. And then we'll kind of go through each one individually. For the yo form, again, always referring to yourself. Come in. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And for the tú form, you're always referring to somebody who you know well as you singular, informal, or somebody that you're familiar with. We'll talk more about that. El is for the equivalent of he. And only when we're talking about, and it doesn't have to be a person. Can a subject be a thing? Yeah. A subject can be a person, place, or thing. So when we replace different objects with he, don't get confused that if I say that I want you to replace el libro with a subject pronoun, you're going to replace it with el. El with an accent or el without? Without is the. We want for subject pronouns the one with, el for he. So if I ask you to replace el libro, it will have a definite article, which we're going to get to in the next section. But the definite article is el. So it'll be el libro. We're going to replace it. El libro, the whole entire thing will go away. We're going to replace it with he, which is basically anything masculine and singular. Okay. And then ella, basically anything feminine and singular. So it doesn't always have to be a girl or a woman. It can be anything that is feminine and singular, any object. And remember, it's ella, not ella. So double L sounds like a Y. Then usted is the last one on the singular side. You can always substitute usted with UD, period. That's a common abbreviation for it. And that's, again, one of our U's. Nosotros, nosotras jumps over to the plural side because it becomes more than one person. So a whole bunch of person, including myself. So anytime you see all those one person or a million people, y yo, that's always going to be nosotros because it includes us. And we've got the feminine version and the masculine version. So a rule of thumb always is if you have a million guys and one girl, then it's going to be nosotros. If we reverse it and have a million girls and one guy, the one guy still makes it the masculine plural nosotros. So always default back to masculine plural unless it's all girls specifically. Then it'll always be nosotras. Then your third person plural, last box on the plural side, you're going to have ellos for anything they or anything that's masculine and plural. And again, same thing, ellos, not elos. And then ellas, anything that's feminine and plural, not just girls or a group of females, but also any object or objects that are feminine and plural. Okay. Ustedes is the last, is what we're going to use for you all, you plural. We can abbreviate it as UDS, and again, that's one of your last U's. So 5 different U's in Spanish. You got to worry about singular, plural, and then the feminine, masculine doesn't really come into play with the U's, only for the vosotros form, which we're going to skip. So we've got for the U's tú, which is singular, usted is singular, vosotros and vosotras are both plural, which we're not going to use because we're going to substitute it with ustedes. Okay. Main difference that we learned in Spanish 1 is that tú is for people that you know well, people that are your own age. Usted for somebody who's older than you or somebody who you show respect to. So just a respect thing that is embedded in the language in Spanish that we don't have a distinction for in English. Okay. All right. So again, the you all we're going to use instead of vosotros, vosotras. We're going to use ustedes. And obviously I'm going over this fast because it's review. This PowerPoint is also on your Schoology if you want to go over it a little bit more slowly. Okay. So for our purposes, vosotros or vosotras or anybody y2 will automatically, if we have y2 normally if we're looking across the box, it's going to be plural vosotros, but we're going to substitute it with ustedes because it's only mostly Spain and Argentina that use the vosotros form. So here's where you're filling in your paper. First box is always going to be the yo form. Okay, no matter what. First person singular, always going to be the yo. And only when you are talking about yourself. In English, we have a capitalization rule that we always capitalize the I. In Spanish, we don't have to. The yo can be lowercase. unless it's the first one in the sentence. If you go across from the singular box to the plural box, and then somebody else joins I, or myself, then we have nosotros and nosotras. And so that's first person on the plural side. It's the we for masculine nosotros, and then for any mixed gender group, and then nosotras only for females. When you talk about yourself and friends, or a whole bunch of people together, including yourself. Two is the second person on the singular side, and it's somebody that you are familiar with. And so you use the informal form of two. Make sure that two has a very clear accent on it, because if it doesn't, it's something else we're going to talk about today. What's two without an accent? Right, your. Good. And then vosotros, vosotras, we're going to skip because we are going to use ustedes instead. Okay, so we're not using that one. Also, always good to fill it into the box so that you know that it exists. I don't like just making a first person and a third person box on the plural side, because there is a second person that we just don't use. So on the third person singular box, basically if you go from the singular side, el, he by itself, which is, again, don't forget the accent on that one. Same thing, if we take away the accent, changes the whole entire meaning of the word on this one, which becomes, el without an accent is the or the. Good. Okay. If we go across the box and we're talking about one singular masculine something, and then we have plural masculine things, then we say ellos. So always looking across the box, they all have a kind of direct correlation there. Ella for she, for singular, anything feminine. Ella for they, plural feminine. And then usted, the singular form, and ustedes, the plural form for talking formally to you. You singular, one person, you plural, you all. So again, if we have anybody that joins two, so if we say Maria y tú, or Maria, a million people y tú, we're technically going to the vosotros box if we're jumping over to the plural side, because we're not using it, we're substituting it with ustedes. Questions so far? Okay. On your Schoology, you have on your document a few practice. We don't have to do all of them. Again, I always like to give you extra stuff just in case you need it. So on these, I want you to go through and tell me, is there any replacement for I? I is I and always will be I. So I in Spanish is yo. But if we were saying Juan, Juan, Juan in a sentence, what would we replace Juan with? Which subject pronoun? El. El with an accent. And make sure that accent's clearly there. Okay. If we have los alumnos as a subject and then we want to replace it with a subject pronoun, it would be ellos. Good. I want to give you a few minutes to practice those, and then I want to come back and go over those answers in just a few minutes.